Much better.
Okay, so Brad,
Yay! Yeah.
I was out of town over the weekend, so I didn't get a chance to catch up and finish everything. So is that okay? Am I okay? Or
Yes.
okay,
You're
cool.
fine.
All right. I would try and make it up the next couple of days.
How about now, Dwight?
I almost finished everything. I still have a problem with Git, so I need some help later.
We will dive into that. Okay, good. Awesome. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Well, let me welcome everyone to the Wednesday class. Tonight we're going to be going over two-column layout, which is exciting stuff. You may have run into it in your prototypes to a small degree. All right, so here we go. Okay, so one of the more difficult things to do, especially in the beginning, is putting together, I did not do what I wanted, wrong file, is trying to put together a two-column layout. So let's go ahead and start with 3 divs. Actually, let's do these using semantic tags, more like what you've been used to. So we'll go with header, a nav, neck, and a main tag. Okay, header, and start nav, and a main. Okay, so if we go ahead and load this initial thing, we'll see our three elements. I'm a header, I'm a side nav, and I'm a main. Let's go ahead and give them some background colors, because that always makes things easier. So we'll go to header, I could spell, like that. Can someone here give me a background color? Orange. Let's start there. And let's go ahead and give it a height of 40 pH. Next, we'll create our nav selector. Can I have another color? Any particular type of blue?
Turquoise?
Probably is an option. Look at that, turquoise. Perfect. Okay, and let's give this, let's say a width, height of 40. Let's do the same one. Height of, I changed my mind. 20. Height of 80 VH. And our main, in honor of Cody, because he's not with us. Go with chartreuse. That's his favorite color.
Oh, is it really?
It really is. And height of 80 VH. That'll be a good place to start. Okay, let's go back to here. Oh, nothing.
No colors.
No colors. Can anybody tell me why?
You have to import the list.
Thank you, sir. Perfect. Helps so much when we actually link it in. I always like to leave that in there. Let's see what we got now. Cool. I am a header, I am a side nav, I am a main. So these are block level elements. So if we inspect them, we can see that they all take up the full width. We didn't have to set any width, but display block elements are always 100% width by default.
Okay.
So let's go ahead and adjust that then. We want the header to stay the same size and cover everything. But for the nav, we only want that to take up about, let's say, 25% of the page. And the main will take up the rest of it. Let's try that. Because less, I remember 75 plus 25 does equal 100. Let's make sure that still works. Let's see what we got going on here. Well, the sizes look about right, but we're experiencing some type of a problem. Who can tell me what that is? And those in the home audience, you are welcome to guess as well. So we have our elements, we have our width set, 25% and 75%.
The main is down below a little bit
The main is down below.
instead of kind of
Yeah, because what we'd hope, right, having 75% and 25%, that they would sit together right here. But they're not doing that. It's okay if you don't know why. I'll tell you why. Let's check it out. So when we inspect, if we look at the nav, we see the width, which is about 25%, which is covering this much of the page. But you have all this orange stuff that's over on the side. So let's actually look at what we got going on here. Now, typically, margin is what's displayed in kind of that orange color. Like this. But if we look at here, we don't actually have any margin on here. Because we have margin, and it's not showing up as any set value. But what we're experiencing is display block. Like I said, display block takes up 100% of the page by default, and it will never take up less than 100% of the page by default. No matter what you set on it, the background color will only take the amount that we actually set it on, the 25%, but it'll still take up the rest of the entire element. And we can see in here, in the user agent style sheet, which is the default styling for the page, that this is what Google calls like their default styling, because different browsers will have different names for it. But the user agent style sheet in Chrome has all of our semantic, not all of them, but all of these semantic tags are set to display block by default. So what we need is to find a display type that isn't block, apparently. So do we have any suggestions on a different display type that we can use? It's cool. It's totally cool if we don't.
right.
It's what we're all here for, right? Oh, Leonard has something. I think he said to call him Van. Display flex. I like where you're going with that, but we're not going to touch display flex just yet. It's a little outside of the Ken that we're playing with. So first, we're going to look at inline. So let's go back to our CSS here. And let's change our nav to display inline. We'll do the same thing on the main. Let's see if that helps. Well, it helped in degrees. But here we are. We have our side nav and our main. They're sitting next to each other, but they're very small. We'll go ahead and look at our inspector again. There's I am main. Notice that the background color is taking up just enough space to cover the text that's in there. And the reason for that is display inline will not take any heights or widths that you set. They will only take up as much space as is dictated by their contents. Because the only content we have here is text, it's going to take up just enough space to fill out that text. So even though we have height and width set on it, it's not going to have any effect. So our next step from here, let's see if I can, we had a display flex. Does anybody know the next place we can go after inline? Looks like a negatory. Okay, no problem. We got this planned out. So what we're going to go for is inline block. Inline block is very much like inline, but it has one nice feature. It allows you to set heights and widths to it. So you can think of inline block as inline, but you can set the size. So let's check our numbers again. We have a 75% width here, 25% width here, height of 20 VH, which is viewport height, and then 80 and 80. So what we'd expect is 100% and 100% total. At least we'd hope that. Let's see what happens. Well, still dealing with the same problem. Let's check this out. So let's inspect this element. Well, you notice now that all the orange is gone. So this element is only taking up the size that we set for it.
Which is the margin, right? The orange is the margin.
The orange, it's kind of, with display block, it's more like a pseudo margin. It's not technically margin, but it's kind of the way that the browser displays it as margin. So, okay, unless I lost it, 25% and 100% don't seem to equal 100% anymore. Let's go ahead and change this width directly, which we can do inside the inspector. Oh, well, it seems at 74% it sits there. But we have some weird stuff going on here. We've got a white gap here, and we've got this white going all the way around the element, it seems, all the way around everything on the page. Can anybody guess as to what this white border is?
Margin.
We have one for margin. Do we have anything from the home audience? We have none things from the home audience. You are correct, sir. Margin. Margin is what we're looking for. Now, by default, notice this margin of 8 when I select the body. So we're selecting the body and we're looking at it as a default margin of 8. The reason it has a default margin of 8 is that back in the earlier days when CSS wasn't really that much of a thing, if anybody remembers what web pages used to look like, basically just blocks of text and there wasn't a lot going on. So that giving that 8 margin allowed everything to sit away from the edge of the page, because it's hard to read stuff when it's just slammed up against the edge of the page. So they said, you know, let's give it a little bit of margin in case everything blows up. At least everything's not sitting all the way on the end. So for our purposes, we're going to go ahead and get rid of that. We'll do that. So let's make a selector for our body. And we'll set our margin to 0. Okay, so after we do that, let's go back and take a look. Well, it's better. Get everything sitting, but our white bar is gone, but there's our main again. And you'll notice the reason that this jumped back, and when I inspect it again, this is a good time to bring this up. The width is back to 75%.
Not 74?
No, because any changes that you make inside of the inspector here, when you refresh the page, they go away.
The changes go away?
Yes.
Oh.
So any changes here are not permanent.
Okay.
If you refresh, they're gone. It's a good thing to remember that, because you actually want to do a lot of your CSS work like this inside of the inspector, because it makes it so that as you change things, you can instantly watch it happen without having to reload the page over and over again. But don't forget that they're not saved unless you save them. Usually the easiest way to do that is after you make any changes, you click on that link that takes you to your style CSS, and this is the one that the page is currently using. So if we go back, we'll take the main, we'll change it to 74%, which gets it to sit there again, but we're still having a problem. But before we fix that, let's say we change it to 74, we click on this link to take it to our style page, and you'll notice the width 74 is in here. So you can actually just highlight that, go back to your CSS, and paste it in. And you'll notice that the 74% is now there. That's the easiest way to just go in directly, pull out the stuff that you've customized, and then dump it into your own CSS. But even with that,
The borders?
which
Border?
this?
Yeah.
It's not a border, but I love what you're thinking. So this is a problem though. We have this white gap here, which is why we can't set it to 75% because something here is taking up space. Now, do we have any thoughts beyond border of what that might be? And if anybody gets this one, I'll be extraordinarily impressed.
Let's Google.
I love the way you think. Because that's what we do when we don't know exactly what's going on. We Google it. Any thoughts from anybody at home before we dive into it? After that display flex thing, nobody wants to jump in anymore. Okay, well, I'll tell you what it is. The problem that we're facing here is the space allocated to the new line character. Now, the new line character, if we go back to our HTML, is the space that exists between the end of this line and the beginning of this line. And to prove it, we take that line out. It sits now. Isn't that interesting? Remember that every character has to take up space on the page. And the reason for that is everything has a default font. There's a default font size that goes to all things, which is why you're able to see all this text in here. So I am main, I am a side nav, I am a header is because you have a default default font size.
To the right of that.
Oh, that's because of the width thing, but we'll get to that. So if we click here, and we actually, where's our we have to go to body, I think. Nope, HTML. Where is it? Could usually have oh well. We'll find another way to look at it. Where's our inspector? Elements, style, listeners, breakpoints, accessibility. We're investigating the inspector right now. Oh, here we go. Computed. Didn't show up before. So computed will always have all of the styles associated with any particular element that you're dealing with. Where is font size though? It's interesting that it doesn't show up there. Oh, I spoke too soon. Anyway, the default font size on in HTML and Chrome is 18 pixels, 16 pixels, I'm sorry. So you're always starting with the default of 16 pixels. So because of that, you end up with that gap. And so I went ahead and moved the line back because you don't ever want to be the person that is doing this. You don't want all of your HTML to be on one weird line because you're trying to get stuff to sit next to each other. So we're going to have to find another way to do that. So the first thing that we're going to do is that we're going to put the nav and the main within a container. Now, the reason I'm using container as the class is not because of any inherent functionality that it does have. Just a good name for something that contains things. So now these are children of the container. Ooh, don't want to spell it like that. There is, when we get to Bootstrap, container is something that they use. It's a class name that they use often as far as containing elements, but that has nothing to do with what we're doing right now, but something to be aware of going forward. So what we're going to want to do, let's go ahead and create, we'll do that here. Create a container class. Inside of the container, we're going to set, let's do our font size to 0. This is a good time to bring up, anytime you're using 0 for any property, like when I used margin 0 on the body, you don't have to indicate a unit of measure at all. You have to use VH or pixels or VW or VMin or any of those other things, because 0 is 0, no matter what. I used to put pixels and all that stuff, and then they made fun of me a lot, so I stopped doing it. It doesn't mean that it doesn't work. You can put anything after that. It just looks funny to people who program after a while. They're like, why are you putting 0? Because it makes sense to me. Well, it fit everything together, but now the text is gone. That's decidedly problematic. So by eliminating the font size that we had in here that would close up this gap, we've now eliminated any font that exists inside of the elements. That's not a good solution. So we're going to have to take it a step further. I'm going to change this back to 75%. That should, okay, good. So what we're going to have to do is set on the body, we're going to set the font size to 0. Now, and that's going to end up killing everything. Okay, so the whole body has a font size of 0. And we're going to make another selector for everything that is a direct child of the body. This selector, the greater than, means direct child. So what we have here is everything, which is the star, because star means everything, that is a direct child of the body. If we look back at our HTML, we have the body, and there's 3 children. The header, or 2 children, I'm sorry. The header and our new div with the class of container. So what we want to do is to give everything that is a child of the body a font size. I'm a big fan of REM, not just the band, but also the size. Thank you for remembering who they are. We still got that back, but oops, we dropped off again. That is not what we need. Look at this. Isn't CSS fun? My style stuff. Oh, here we go. That's not what I want. Okay, we continue. I did something goofy. Let me fix this real quick. Is there a channel? I hate when I do that. Oh, my bad. Excuse me, sorry about that, guys. So container, we want to set the font size to 0. We don't need to do it on this one, because all we're going to do is fix those elements. Okay, so font size 0, which will take us back. We'll review that before we do anything. That'll take us back to this. And then we're going to do everything that is a direct child of the container. We're going to give that a font size. That's what we're going for. Oh, all kinds of new stuff in there. There we go. Isn't that magic? So what we did was, by containing the elements within the container, we set the font size on the body to 0, which eliminated any new line characters between these elements. And then we went ahead and gave a font size to everything that is a direct child of the container. So now everything fits together. So this looks good, but let's see what happens when we do this. Gonna make it, oh, uh-oh. We ran into a problem. Does anybody have any thoughts on what this might be? This is another one that if anybody gets it, I'll be extraordinarily impressed. But once in a while, somebody does. Man, I like that. It's not what it is, but I like that. What about, what made you think it was position?
I was working on the version 3 earlier today, and I had part of that, and I was trying to play around with it, and I wasn't 100% sure what exactly it did, but changed things around a little bit. So I thought,
Well, that's the perfect. Playing with it is the exact way to start getting into it. Positioning is one of those things that's really can be a pain. But what this specific problem is related to the way CSS by default aligns text and adjacent elements. ENDL. What is ENDL, Dwight? While he's thinking about that, the problem that we're facing here, again, is the way CSS by default deals with elements that are next to each other that have text inside of them. So what's going on, it's aligning the text at the bottom. And we don't want it to do that. So we're going to add a nice, cool little to our main. We're going to give it vertical align. Top. So by setting vertical align top, it will now align the elements that have text next to each other by the top of the element, no longer on the bottom. Most people that run into vertical align, they think it has something to do with like vertical centering of elements. It does not have anything to do with that. It only is related to this, to making sure that text aligns. And as you can see, there is different. There's many different things that you could set for it. Baseline, bottom fixes it too, apparently. Sub, super, text bottom, so that drops the whole thing. Text top, and this normal top. So top is what typically when you run into that, and anytime you run into that situation, that's what you're looking for, is vertical align top. Oh, end align. Like we were thinking, but we went ahead and got through the answer. Does that make sense to everybody at home? Do we have any follow-up questions on any of that? Do you guys have any follow-up questions on anything we've done so far?
They always have to be the blue and the green parallel, or they can be horizontal.
And what do you mean horizontal?
I mean, it's always the blue can be in top and the green in the bottom, or always they have to be
Next to each other?
next to each other.
For this, for this particular example, this is just showing the difficulties associated with trying to get elements to sit next to each other. You can have them sit any way you want to sit them. The beauty of CSS.
And this is only because we set it to 2575, right?
Yes. So for example, and this is an extreme example. The reason that we show this is to go over some of the kind of quirky and interesting behavior that CSS has. Because how many times have you been to a web page where you see elements slammed into each other? It doesn't happen very often. No, yeah, usually there's nice spacing between things. Like they'll probably, for example, you'll probably have a side nav that's maybe that big, and then 11 main. I'm gonna change their position on it. Relative. Right. What's wrong with F20? So most likely, like when you're doing real things, you'll end up with, you know, spacing between elements and stuff like that. But again, the purpose of this is just to show how strange CSS can be, especially when you don't know all the underlying tools and the things that are going on. Because CSS, I'm sure you guys have run into, can be extraordinarily frustrating, to put it mildly. Cool. And you guys blew through that. Is there any follow-up questions on anything related to tool column layout? None? Man, you guys are good. Best class ever. That is actually the lecture side of it. It usually goes a lot longer and people ask a lot more questions.
We reached the end.
Well, just the end of that. We'll put more stuff into it because everybody's here and we'll answer questions and do all that fun stuff. Let's see. Well, let's dive in and just start asking questions. Does anybody have any? Does anybody here have any questions about anything so far that you're dealing with in the program? And the same at home. Does anybody have any questions about problems that, you know, concepts they're having issues with?
Upload on the Git. Still Git.
Oh, Git. How's everybody else doing with Git?
I think I'm okay. The first time I tried it, something went wrong because when I typed, like, you know, all the prototypes have the instructions on how to do the Git stuff going after, and I got an error message, but I just closed everything out, tried to do it again. So,
Sometimes that does it, yeah. I like that. What particular do you have questions about Git?
So when you upload something, you always have to download something. How can I get just to upload?
What do you mean by uploading?
Just to put the page what I did, the V1 project and the V2 project and the V3. How do I upload them? How do I?
It's kind of confusing because I feel like one of the videos you showed us
It's
said
totally
to go on GitHub
Yeah.
and click the download or clone button, whereas another one says just do it all through the terminal.
The clone you just do the one time to get it.
Yeah.
Yeah, just to get it down
Yeah.
onto your computer. And then after that, it's a matter of pushing and pulling.
Yes, how do you-
versions after that.
Okay, cool.
I pushed them, but didn't go through, I guess. I didn't push hard enough.
Okay, so for an example, pull up something that I can mess with.
What, you see, that's what I'm confusing. Why you have to pull up something to push something? But I don't want to pull. I just want to push.
Well, you have to have like code to push.
I have code to push.
Why you have code to push,
Yeah.
but I don't have
Oh,
code
you
to
don't.
push.
Okay. That's why I got confused.
Okay, so let's go with actually go with that. Let's do git B this branch. Can't put spaces, it won't work. I'm going to go ahead and open this to okay. So we start with just sweet corner at its barest. There's nothing in there. So I go to index.html. Make a div. Hey, look, we got a div. Hi, I'm a test. Perfect. So let's go ahead and go into our Git now. So I went into the repository, I made a new branch, and then I made a new file in that branch and put a couple of things in it. So let's do a git status. So there's the new stuff that was just added.
You see this part, I don't get it. It doesn't.
Well, perfect. That's what we're going to go through right now. Okay, so when it's
I can't
like
find the branch.
when it's like this, this means that these files have yet to be added. So before you commit and send anything, you have to add everything. A good way to think about it is like you're doing a like a box if you're going to mail something. So you add things into it, and then committing it is like sealing it and putting the label on it. So the first thing we have to do is add. Now using dot is saying in this folder and every folder below it. Because we say in the beginning it pretty much means everything, and usually it does.
Right.
But if you were working on something in which you were in, say, a directory that was a few levels down, and then you use that, it wouldn't add everything that was above you if you had anything. So add with the dot means from this directory down. And because we're in the top directory right now, the prototypes root 1, there's no more levels above us, so we don't have to worry about that. So we're going to add. And then after we add, we're going to do what we always do after we do anything, and run git status.
Okay.
So now it's green. So now it's added and ready to be committed. So we're going to commit. Commit. And then we're going to run git status again. So nothing to commit, working tree clean. Now, say if we had to go work on another prototype, like if you're going back and forth between them, this would be the time that you could do that. So I can just git checkout. The only other branch I have on here is master, but I'm gonna go ahead and check out to that one. Check out master. No problem. Notice our file is gone because we're no longer on that branch. It only exists on that branch. It hasn't been merged or anything into anywhere else. So we're here. You can do a git status. There won't be anything. Nothing. So now we're going to check out back to our test branch. Notice our index file has returned. And that's something that kind of messes with people a lot in the beginning, is if you leave that branch, everything's gone. But it's not really gone. It's just on that branch. So anytime you check out back to it, it'll show up again. Okay, so next, we got to push. We got to the push part. So we'll check again using git branch to confirm that we're in the right place. There's a lot of them. Wow, there's a lot of branches. There it is, test branch. Yours won't have nearly that much. It's because I'm working on our own repository. But the one that you are on will always be highlighted in green like this. So that's how you can know what branch you're on actively. Conversely, if you type git status, it'll tell you what branch you're on. And also, if you're on a Windows computer, it has that little parentheses around it, like yours will probably say that in the git bash, where it'll tell you what branch that you're on.
I still don't. So that's the, can you go?
We'll get more into that. We'll just go over this as quick as our pushing and everything. Okay, so make sure we're on the right branch. We are. So we're going to git push origin, the name of the branch. What origin means here, you can basically think of it as a variable that contains the URL that you're pushing to. And we can actually look at that. So when we hit get remote -v, we can see here's our origins and the associated URL with those origins. For these ones, both our push and fetch are the same. That's very common. You can set it to be different, but it's you have to have specific reasons for doing so. Like if you're pulling stuff from one repository and then sending it to another. But typically, this is what you're going to see. So origin, again, is just representing this URL. So if we get push origin, and then test branch, it goes through all that fun stuff and then tells me, go ahead and create a pull request if you'd like right here. So everything's been pushed, which means when we go to GitHub, notice that prototypes root 1 is up there. And there's our test branch. So then we go to compare and pull request. This one only has 2 because I'm working on the master one. This isn't the forked version. Yours has those 4 different pull downs where your base fork is going to be our repository. This branch is going to be your branch that we've created for you on our repository. Then the 3rd one over here will be your repository, and then the branch you're working on in that repository. So it's a little bit different for that. So if we want to make a pull request, after we confirm that all of our dropdowns are correct, we create the pull request. And you notice it shows up right here. There's the test commit. And then this is the other pull requests that have been turned in so far. So any pull requests that are done to the prototypes root 1 will show up on this page. And if you ever want to go look at your old ones, this is the place to do it. So we have our test commit. I'm not going to merge it because they get mad at me. But if you do it, when you do get to the point if you start merging and stuff, this is where you do that.
Now, if you did all this and you put in the pull request, but then like you go back and realize there's something you want to fix, and you wanted to replace that, would you just go through the same process all over again?
It's much simpler, actually. It's much simpler. So let's go through that right now. Because updating a pull request is one of the things that you have to do on occasion. You know, like, oh, I need to fix this. I need to update the pull request. It's like, well, what does that mean? So updating the pull request. Go back here. Okay, we're still on test branch, which is perfect because that's what we want to do. Let's say, hi, I'm a test. I don't like that anymore. I want a p tag as lorem 45. Lots of lorem ipsum text. And before we do this, let's look at our files changed. So here's the file that I had just turned in. So I changed it now. Now we have a p tag with a bunch of lorem ipsum text inside of it. Let's go back here. We'll do another get status. Modified. So we have another thing that we have to add now. So we're going to get add. And we get status again, because we always get status. It's green now, it's been added. Seems good. Now we're going to commit. Updated pull request. Okay, that's been updated, so we'll do our get status one last, if I can only spell. We do our get status one more time, and we're on test branch, nothing to commit, everything's been done. So now we're going to push again. Oop. That's my H doubles for some reason. It's amazing what you can spend on a MacBook and then so we went ahead and pushed. It goes through the whole thing. It says go here to make your pull request. Actually, it doesn't say that. Notice it doesn't say to make a pull request.
So if must be updated.
Yep. So that's all you have to do.
Okay, so it just updated the one from previous?
It'll update that
Overrode it.
that branch.
Okay, just
Because if that branch happens to be in a pull request, it's going, whether or not it was in a pull request, that branch is going to get updated when you push.
Okay.
But since there's already a pull request open on that branch, any further pushes that you do are going to update that pull request. So it does it automatically.
Gotcha. That's good.
Cool. Does that make sense to everybody in the home audience? Seems like it, yes. While we're waiting for them. Do you have a more precise question on that?
Yes. How do I get to the file? Like so that's my homework, yeah? How do I get to this file?
How do you get to this file? I'll jump on that with you as soon as we finish.
Okay.
So we'll go ahead and one-on-one that. Do you guys have any questions about anything you run into in the program?
I am just like now starting, so that's what I was trying to tell you.
Okay, yeah.
So yeah. Mhm.
I accept that.
No, ever since that first time, it's been pretty smooth for me.
Bless you, son. That's awesome. We like smooth.
I've heard that.
Git is troublesome,
Yeah.
to say the least. It causes a lot of grief. But eventually, it's like tying shoes. It gets easier and easier. All right, home people, do we have any questions about anything? This is your time to shine. And can you still hear us? I'd like to think so. We still got a thing going. We're still broadcasting. Unless everybody just logged in and then went to watch TV or something.
I got distracted.
That happens. We've had where there's like 15 people and it's like everybody just ghosted. The fun part is when they leave their mics on and then like,
You hear them?
yeah, you hear everything that's going on. Especially when people try to get a little bit lifted and stuff like that. Like, why do I hear bubbling? All right, man, this must be like the best class ever. No questions. Everybody's doing fine. Oh, Michael's got something. There's nothing like watching the typing. Everybody stare at it. Something's going to happen. My favorite is, oh, there we go. Are we supposed to go over all the material on day 3 before class? That would be preferable. You typically want to go over any of the associated materials with that day prior to the class, or I mean Wednesday. Yes, same answer still applies. It's generally helpful because it introduces you into some of the things that we'll be dealing with and things we're talking about. So does anybody have any questions on CSS or HTML or anything? Now is your time. It's okay to ask because nobody knows everything. Most of us only know a little. That's the thing about programming. Like the more stuff you learn, you just realize how much you don't know.
What, one question for
Yes, sir.
pictures on HTML. What's the difference, or is it the same for when it's SRC or URL before the path?
Are you talking about background images versus image tags?
Yeah.
Okay, that's a good question. So with image tags, let me open something actually. That's that. Do I have all that stuff? Here it is. That's the one I want. Oh, that's media queries. That's not what we want. We're looking for the one with the peritos. There we go. I like flying puppers. So we'll notice with these ones that these are image tags. Now, the big difference between image tags and background images, there's actually several differences. One of them is SEO. If you guys are familiar at all, is anybody familiar at all with SEO? It's search engine optimization. Basically, it's what makes sure that your pages show up when people do searches for stuff similar to whatever it is you have. Alt text is a big part of that. So when you actually have an image tag in your HTML, that image is loaded into the HTML. It's actually a part of it. So when Google is going through the page and checking things out, it can actually pull that image out and then check it against like your alt text. Notice how badly I failed in this one because I don't have alt text. But when you have that, it gives more information to Google and it does a correlation between like the image and that. And then it can actually give you higher or lower ratings depending on things like that. Because it's actually loaded in. Background images are not loaded in. Background images are just CSS drawing it in, essentially.
Okay.
And like an image tag by default will have a size. I can do a simple example of that. Let's go ahead and dump this for now. We'll do, actually, do images. We'll use something from, we'll use a British flag. See, notice that I don't have any CSS at all set on this. And it just takes up the size. It takes up its original size. So we go here, it's 1080 by 894. So that's the entire thing. It takes up all that space. Now, if we do it in a different way, that's what an image tag will do that by default. So let's go ahead up here. Style. Oh my God, I made another one. Yeah. Images slash. I'll just use. Oh, where's that flag? Right
British flag.
there it is. Yeah, perfect. That's okay. Make sure I path that right. So notice we have a URL set, and we have a background image set, but we don't have anything. Because background images will only fit on an element depending on its size. Like if the element has no size other than that, it's not content in and of itself. The image tag is, like when you put an image in, it fills everything up, but background images aren't.
Okay.
So we have to add more stuff to it. Background size. Contain. So because we gave it a height now,
Yourself and
yeah.
stuff like that, okay.
And that's what the, and you guys will run into this. Still gonna get there, come on. There we go. You said background repeat to no repeat.
Okay.
Then it will only pick up, it won't any longer repeat. Now the reason this thing repeated so much is because we have a div again, so it takes up the full width of the page. But notice what happens as we change our height. It scales. This is why with background images and images in general, you only set either a height or a width, and not both. Because if we do set a width, it starts, well, because of the repeating. So I think we can get rid of that now.
You just set the width to wherever you like it to be.
Well, you typically don't want to set a width. This isn't displaying it the way I want to. You want to say, oh, see, here it goes. Oh, because I have it on contain. Notice with contain, this is good worth bringing up, is that it'll cut off anything that doesn't fit. Which is nice sometimes if you have a very specific size, you need all of your images, things to fit within. So you can just trim off a little bit and it does it automatically. Yeah, essentially it does like an auto crop. Let's go back to our image. Go ahead and get rid of that. And this time we'll set a height of pixels. Let's give it a width. So notice with the image, as we change the size, it starts to squish. This is why you don't want to set height and width. Because if you set one, it'll automatically set the other in order to maintain the aspect ratio of the original image. So that's because people they'll do this stuff and they're, especially when you're trying to do responsive layouts, they'll set percentages on it and they're like, well, as I shrink the page, like the element starts like looking funky. And that's why. Because if you set both of them, you're not letting the browser dictate the proper aspect ratio, so it's just it's gonna squeeze it into wherever it can fit. Did that clear up some of the stuff regarding images?
Definitely. Thank you.
Cool. You're welcome. Hey, we reached 8 o'clock. We still got plenty of time. Further questions about anything? And this goes for the at-home people too. If not, we can move into just emotional support because I know how stressful this can be. I remember being in the root class and like, oh my God, spent like, there's one of the prototypes is I spent like hours on it trying to get it perfect. And I finally turned it in. They were like, you really don't need to get it that perfect. It's like, but I thought I had to. I thought I was going to get kicked out if it wasn't perfect. We don't kick anybody out if it's not perfect. And a lot of that comes from thinking that you can do things that you can't really do in the beginning. Like if you're trying to build a responsive page where like no matter how you move it, everything looks fine, that's not going to happen.
Mm.
Not at this stage. It takes like tons of work to get to stuff that will do that. So don't overstress yourselves. Wow, nothing from the home audience. All right, I'll turn it back to you guys because I'm here until we close up shop. Anything from home? Going once, going twice? Anything about CSS selectors or why does my page look funky? How do I get an element to do this and that? No, I guess not. All right. Well, I want to thank everybody who's remote for joining us. I will give you approximately 30 seconds to a minute to see if you have any more questions. If not, we'll go ahead and kill the feed for tonight, and I can thank you all for coming. So there we go. And I know you have further questions. So
Yeah.
I'll just dive in on that. Anything for you?
So I haven't had a chance to actually start because I was out of town.
This is the
so-
perfect time.
Okay, so I'm still okay to keep going and moving
Yeah.
forward. Okay, so I just have to do everything that was back on.
Yeah, we're not that strict and hardcore.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so I can. do
You
the
work at your
catch-up.
pace.
Cool. And then the other question is, I got an email from PJ to do the.
TJ?
I'm sorry, TJ to do the.
I like peanut butter and jelly.
No.
That's the first thing that went in my head. I was like, a
I
snack?
don't know why that came to my mind first. To do those classes, the videos, right? And then he wanted me to go ahead and still do that root assessment anyways. But I'm like, I haven't started anything because I've been like out of town and I just came back and I'm.
Which root assessment was he talking about?
Let me show you.
Okay, one last time, everybody at home, I want to thank you very much for tuning in tonight. If you do have any further questions about anything, please reach out to us on Slack. Know how frustrating and difficult some of this stuff can be because we've all been through it. So if you have anything that you need help with, anything at all, just let us know. Thank you very much again for tonight, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
I want to give them a minute to see if they kick off.